The talks lasted approximately 4 hours and were exceptionally substantive, constructive, and I would say, extremely frank and trusting. It was agreed that the first meeting of the Trilateral Working Group on Security Issues will take place in Abu Dhabi today, Friday, January 23rd.
Do you think that the Trilateral that the US, Russia, and Ukraine are having in Abu Dhabi this weekend leads to a trilateral between you, Putin, and Zelensky?
Look, it's all good. Anytime we meet, it's good. If you don't meet, nothing's going to happen.
On January 22nd, Russia announced that it had carried out a series of high-precision strikes targeting Ukraine's critical energy infrastructure, the latest escalation in its ongoing campaign to cripple the country's power grid during winter. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that its forces employed unmanned aerial vehicles, precision-guided missiles, and long-range artillery to hit energy facilities alleged to be supplying electricity to Ukrainian military operations. Russian forces have repeatedly targeted Ukraine's power plants and electrical substations in recent months, causing widespread blackouts and leaving thousands without heat or light in sub-zero temperatures. According to Russia's defense ministry, Ukrainian armed formations and foreign fighters were struck across 142 locations, reflecting what Moscow described as a nationwide operation to disrupt Kyiv's battlefield logistics. Russian Ministry of Defense said, quote, "Operational tactical aviation, attack drones, missile troops and artillery of the Russian groups of forces have inflicted damage on energy infrastructure facilities used in the interests of the armed forces of Ukraine, ammunition depots, temporary deployment areas of Ukrainian armed formations and foreign mercenaries in 142 areas." In a follow-up statement reported by TASS, Russian commanders also claimed that Ukrainian forces lost up to 1,240 troops along the eastern engagement line within a single 24-hour period, though these figures remain unverified. Moscow released footage purporting to show a Garin series attack drone striking a railway bridge deep inside Ukrainian-controlled territory. Footage it claims demonstrates the precision of its latest aerial campaign. Russia said the targeted bridge stood across the same river near Ukraine's Sumy region, and that the strike was intended to disrupt rail movements of Ukrainian reinforcements and military supplies. The Russian assault followed a Ukrainian strike the previous day on an oil terminal located in Russia's southern Krasnodar Krai, an attack that Kyiv said was retaliation for recent bombing raids. Initial reports indicated that at least 3 people were killed and 8 more injured in the Ukrainian attack, which sparked fires and temporarily halted energy distribution in the region. Separate local sources reported that subsequent Ukrainian strikes also hit the Republic of Adygea, killing 1 person and injuring 11 others, details later confirmed by the Kyiv Independent. As both nations traded heavy blows, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Davos, Switzerland, attending the World Economic Forum where he sought to rally continued international backing for Kyiv's defense. In Davos, Zelensky publicly questioned the resolve of Western allies to sustain their support, while also holding a high-profile meeting with US President Donald Trump to discuss possible paths toward a negotiated settlement.
Next point. I've said it before and I'll repeat it again. Europe needs united armed forces that can truly defend Europe. Today, Europe relies only on the belief that if danger comes, NATO will act. But no one has really seen the alliance in action. If Putin decides to take Lithuania or strike Poland, who will respond? Who will respond? Right now, NATO exists thanks to believe that the United States will act, that it will not stand aside and will help. But what if it doesn't? Right now, we are working actively with partners on security guarantees, and I'm grateful for that, but those are for after the war ends. Once the ceasefire begins, there will be contingents and joint patrols and partner flags on Ukrainian soil. And that is a very good step and the right signal that UK and France are ready to actually commit their forces on the ground, and there is already a first agreement on that. Thank you, Keir, thanks Emmanuel, and all the leaders in our coalition. And we are doing everything to make sure that our coalition of the willing truly becomes a coalition of action. And again, everyone is very positive, but, always but the backstop of President Trump is needed. And again, no security guarantees work without the US.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin was meeting in Moscow with senior aides from the Trump administration, signaling Washington's emerging efforts to mediate between the two warring sides through parallel diplomatic channels. On the same day, the French Navy intercepted a Russian-operated oil tanker in the Mediterranean Sea, an enforcement action that coincided with mounting Western pressure on Moscow's maritime logistics. According to a report by NBC News, the vessel was sailing under a false flag registered to the Comoros Islands off East Africa, a suspected example of Moscow's growing use of shadow fleet operations to move sanctioned oil. Earlier this month, the U.S. Navy had seized another Russian tanker, the Marinera, prompting a furious response from the Kremlin and escalating tensions over the enforcement of energy sanctions at sea. In the aftermath of that seizure, Moscow retaliated militarily, using its nuclear-capable Orshnik missile to strike the western Ukrainian city of Lviv, a location alarmingly close to NATO's eastern frontier. Looking ahead, Russia, the United States and Ukraine are expected to hold their first-ever trilateral talks on January 23, a landmark diplomatic engagement aimed at exploring ways to end the conflict. Speaking to reporters, President Trump said he remains open to the prospect of an in-person trilateral summit with Presidents Putin and Zelensky, describing direct dialogue as the best chance yet for achieving a ceasefire and lasting peace in the region. The talks lasted approximately 4 hours and were exceptionally substantive, constructive, and, I would say, extremely frank and trusting. The interlocutors, as is well known, had arrived from Davos, where, literally before their flight to Moscow, they had participated in a series of events with their president, Donald Trump, including those related to the Ukrainian settlement. They shared their first-hand impressions and fresh assessments of the US president's meeting in Davos with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, which both Witkoff and Kushner personally attended. They also assessed other contacts they had held in December and January at Mar-a-Lago in Florida and in several European capitals. Overall, I would say the Russian president's meeting with American representatives was specifically focused on gathering information on results of the Americans' contacts with Ukrainian and European partners and jointly defining the parameters for further action. And the next step in this direction was agreed upon. It was agreed that the first meeting of the Trilateral Working Group on Security Issues will take place in Abu Dhabi today, Friday, January 23. The Trilateral Working Group meaning representatives of Russia, the United States, and Ukraine. At the same time, the heads of the Bilateral Economic Group will also meet in Abu Dhabi. This is already a bilateral group, meaning Russia and the United States, Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff. Our security negotiating team has already been assembled and will depart for the Emirates in the coming hours. It includes representatives of the Ministry of Defense Leadership, led by Admiral Kostikov, Chief of the Main Directorate of the General Staff. I'll also say that our delegation just received specific instructions from the Russian president, taking into account all the details of today's conversation with the Americans. The Americans, it must be acknowledged, have done a great deal to prepare this meeting, and they hope that it will be successful and open up prospects for progress on the entire range of issues related to ending the conflict and reaching a peace agreement. Overall, I repeat, the meeting that just concluded in the Kremlin was beneficial in every way for both our and the American sides. It was agreed at the meeting that the Russian and American sides will continue to maintain close contact with each other, both on Ukraine and other issues. Most importantly, during these talks between our president and the Americans, it was once again confirmed that without resolving the territorial issue according to the formula agreed upon in Anchorage, there is no hope of achieving a long-term settlement. We, as Vladimir Putin emphasized, are sincerely interested in resolving the Ukrainian crisis through political and diplomatic means. Until this is achieved, Russia will continue to consistently pursue the objectives set for the special military operation, specifically on the battlefield, where the Russian armed forces hold the strategic initiative. At the meeting in the Kremlin, Donald Trump's initiative to establish a peace council was also discussed, as well as a number of regional issues and the situation surrounding Greenland. During the exchange of opinions on the peace council, our willingness to allocate $1 billion from Russian assets frozen by the previous U.S. administration to this body's budget was emphasized. The remaining funds from our frozen U.S. reserves could be used to rebuild territories damaged by the fighting after a peace treaty is concluded between Russia and Ukraine. Discussions on this topic will continue in the Bilateral Economic Group.
Do you think that trilateral that the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine are having in Abu Dhabi this weekend leads to a trilateral between you, Putin, and Zelensky?
Look, it's all good. Anytime we meet, it's good. If you don't meet, nothing's going to happen. I mean, for the first 3 years, nobody met. Under Biden, nobody met. And you know one thing, if you don't meet, nothing's going to happen. So we are meeting, and we'll see what happens. I hope we can save a lot of lives. And so,
Mr. President, what kind of concessions does Vladimir Putin need to make at this point?
He'll make concessions. Everybody's making concessions to get it done. Europe is going to be a part of it. It's got to be a part of it. Look, it's more for Europe than for me. I mean, I'm doing this more for Europe than for me. I'm doing it to save lives, number one. I'm doing it secondarily for Europe. I'm not doing it so much for the U.S. It doesn't affect us very much. Other than the loss of lives, we're not affected by this. It's thousands of miles away. We're separated by an ocean. But I have an ability to get things done like this, and we'll see if I can get it done. I mean, it would never have gotten done. I thought Putin wanted the whole thing. Maybe he does, but he's not gonna be going there unless we don't make a deal. But we had a good meeting today with President Zelensky. I think a very good meeting.
What's the main holdup? What's the main holdup to getting a deal?
The main holdup is the same things that have been holding it up for the last year. Look, this is a war. This is Biden's war. This isn't my war. This is a war that should have never happened. But it's complex because you have beats and bounds. You have streets. You have rivers. You have everything. Where does it end? So it's a little bit complicated. But I've had that in 5 of the other wars. There are beats and bounds. It's a location. It's boundaries. And I got them done fast in days. And this one is just going on. What's happened here is there were times when Putin didn't want to make a deal, times when Zelensky didn't want to make a deal. And it was like opposite times. Now I think they both want to make a deal, but we'll find out.
Did something change that makes you think that Putin and Zelensky now are serious about it?
Any predictions? There are no changes. I think that President Putin would like to make a deal. I think that President Zelensky would like to make a deal.
What did Zelensky say today? I mean, he came all the way there to meet you. What did he say?
He said he'd like to make a deal. I mean, there's not much you can say. People know the parameters. It's not like, we're discussing things that have been discussed for 6 or 7 months. And he came and he said he wants to make a deal because I wasn't necessarily sure. I think he should want to make a deal. It's pretty tough. It's really tough for the people of Ukraine.